Hello and welcome to today's Creative Commons Open Source Office Hours. We're hanging out on codebuddies.org and we're going to start the day by going through just a few notifications on GitHub, some related to Creative Commons, but overall just trying to catch up on notifications is usually the first step. So this office hours is also looking at other open source projects and community initiatives. We're working through this epic. I'll open a new tab here. We have some contributors to the Creative Commons Chooser project. We're trying to continue developing not only the Chooser, but the Creative Commons vocabulary in parallel with this creativecommons.org project, where we're redesigning the website. It's the top priority, so we're really relying on the community to help us continue these Vue.js projects. So let's see what's been changed here. They're referencing all right, so what is changing here? Oops. Okay, so I think more valuable would be issue 304, the component flowchart. I'll close it and say issue 304. All right, so yeah, I don't want to just outright close it. That was an issue that predates my time at the Creative Commons, and I don't want to just turn away contributors, but also we do have to kind of screen and filter the ideas. I'm not sure that that's really providing a lot of value. as much as this sort of state flow, the overview of how the chooser should behave when different options are chosen. It's I'm not running the project locally, but it's essentially a wizard in a way that it kind of asks you a series of questions about whether or not you would allow commercial uses or derivative works, and for each of your answers, it's choosing a combination of license attributes, and at the end you get your license text, and it has information along the way. I think it's around 7 or 8 steps, and given that there's that many steps and possible permutations of answers, I think the state overview would be useful. So issue 304. That's just my thinking behind the answer I gave. But I don't want to just kind of close that report request, although it is fairly stale. And I'm not sure where I sit on the issues of formatting, whether JPEG or Markdown, things like that, but more I'm just broadly looking at the value it adds informationally. Okay, so let's take a look at the Civi wiki. Pull request updating dependencies as separate requirements files. Okay, this was an interesting one. Proposed by Gorker Marslin. And splits out from another. Let's see, this is the pull request. All right, so then in GitHub, you can just say fixes. Closes or fixes, and I think no dot. So then what will happen is it gets linked down here. And when this pull request is merged, it'll automatically close the issue. And it looks like this is one commit. It's not marked as draft. I'm not sure how familiar most people are with draft. Pull requests. I think the only thing missing would be to update update the README. Let me double check that our README has, or our contributing guide, I think is, we've done this in another project. Contributing MD set needs to be fixed. Which could collide with their branch. Yeah, I don't know if it's literally the word for the components for the diagram, but okay. So actually, I'll just request changes. This also might get superseded by the proposal to switch to poetry. I don't know if I open it as a discussion. All right, so I think we got, so actually there would be changing this step here. Cool. That's a good question. So I encountered a bug. I'm trying to get this project called WordPress environment running locally. I've had pretty good success with it, but was encountering this weird basically issue where it was trying to install Xdebug on a image that hadn't been pruned. It was still dormant, still hanging around. Really incompatible version of Node npm. That's so weird. Let's take a look. Well, I think I'm using NVM, but generally speaking. So All right, so a little bit of feedback on, I guess it was a help request, but I think it was kind of a bug a little bit. I opened a pull request. It's a bug in terms of unnecessary complexity. The Xdebug, in my opinion, shouldn't be installed unless it's needed or explicitly required by the developer. The WP Env environment management tool is used for both JavaScript-oriented Gutenberg development as well as WordPress theme development, PHP. Xdebug is primarily it's for PHP debugging, and even when you're developing PHP, you may not need or want it, but it's being installed regardless. And while the bug might not be directly related to, Xdebug itself, it could be something Docker is not cleaning up the image correctly. It's not pruning things. Pruning resolves the issue. Could be NPM related. I believe fundamentally complexity is playing a large role in having unnecessary dependencies. Introduces unnecessary complexity and increases the likelihood of strange bugs and side effects. It's generally less is more. I take that philosophy very seriously, particularly with software development. And don't use it if you don't need it. So I opened a small pull request that basically doesn't install Xdebug unless the flag is set to true, essentially. By default, Xdebug is set to off with WP Env anyway. So all my change does is when it's set to off, it just doesn't install it either. When you set it to on, it would enable and add configuration values. So let's see what we're looking at here. Template for feature looks good. It's a little bit annoying, but okay. Everybody does it. Everybody uses the headers to control the font size. Today's tea is some organic Darjeeling. This live stream is powered by tea. Next, okay, so this is an ongoing pull request in the vocabulary. We have had, let's see, Sad Nick has been so kind as to help us pull this large reorganization or restructuring pull request over the line. It's really important. This comes back to this idea of simplicity. Our vocabulary project was switched to a monorepo. And I understand there's trade-offs, and I'm not anti-monorepo or super monorepo fan. I understand that context matters. In this case, what happened was we had a monorepo with 3 sub-projects and needed a layer of tooling to run the sub-projects concurrently, which I think is one of the common things in monorepo architecture in any case. So many people in the JavaScript ecosystem are probably familiar with this Lerna. as a result. It's a result of accidental complexity, though, of putting a monorepo architecture in place. What we're trying to do, though, is also look at the other complexities introduced of having 3 sub-projects in the same monorepo with their own dependencies, which actually turned out to be conflicting in mysterious ways. It's such a big ball of opaque dependencies. The fact that we're using Storybook is questionable. I think it's, in any case, we've agreed to continue with Storybook. We're removing Lerna. We're refactoring the project so it's like 1 Storybook project instead of 3 Storybook projects, which ended up having some weird dependency issues with React versions or something like that. It's enough that it has completely stalled the project development, and it has in some way baffled me, but I'm not a senior necessarily JavaScript and React developer. That's not my background, nor do I really want that to be my foreground. But I understand we've inherited that through the use of Storybook, and it also posed a challenge to the main contributors to the vocabulary who have since moved on to other projects. So I mean, I just think it's complexity is the essential thing, and this monorepo idea, I understand in terms of organizational complexity, it's simpler to have all your issues and tasks and things and release all in one repo. But I think that's a byproduct of using GitHub more than actually anything to do with Git itself or the repo structure. Git has things like submodules as well that can be useful tools. And as a way of example, if I want to develop the themes, just the Sass packages, Sass styling, I have to be concerned with like Babel and Storybook and things like that. So it's not just the fact that we're in a monorepo, it's just that I think we've over-engineered this project, and there's like basically only a couple of developers who are responsible for it, and frankly we don't have capacity internally. So yeah, it's just kind of a little bit of a cautionary tale against complexity, against adopting what seem to be best practices or common conventions that are constantly shifting and changing in JavaScript regardless. So I don't have a silver bullet there, but it's just a heuristic. Less is more. Only use what you need and when you need it. And also, the documentation was a little bit problematic. So do your colleagues a favor and yourself a favor by having consistent and reproducible builds and documentation, a well-documented project. This one was not so bad. There are steps to install, and there are some quirks depending on your node version. Again, there's been a big transition, I think, or a relatively large transition in the package format since version 7. So again, really appreciative here to have community involvement, and sad Nick for helping carry this project forward, because we don't have internal capacity for it right now, and we've already encountered a significant amount of delay and complexity with other projects, like including the creativecommons.org rewrite or redesign, in which creativecommons.org is actually 3 projects all kind of stitched together in a way that feels a little bit seamless, but it's actually pretty interesting technical feat. We might be able to feature an article about how the major components of the Creative Commons org website. It's not just WordPress. There's a couple of Django projects involved too, the static build process, for example, for the licenses. So that said, it was a bit of an aside, but it's something that's been really on my mind. Okay, and this is an example maybe of the complexity, but it's a little bit of like a baffling issue. And it's inherently, storybook related, which frankly, this is not a storybook project. The Vue vocabulary is a, Vue project of some components, and storybook is intended to aid your component development, as well as Sass and font packages for styles and fonts, that is. Yeah, and again, this is a baffling issue. I'm not expert with Vue.js either, or Storybook. In JavaScript import, I think this is more of a JavaScript import issue, resolving assets, but from Storybook Markdown, extended Markdown. All right, so let's hop over there and give it a try. And I haven't really been working on vocabulary recently. We've deprioritized it. But since we have a community contributor right now, I'm gonna, have to support their work a bit. We got main. We switch to main branch. We'll pull this in, and I'll look for pull requests here. Get rid of that. And on GitHub, we have some pull requests. Check out pull requests. A lot of files changed because this is coming from a big pull request open by Dhruv, and then Sad Nick has kind of taken up where Dhruv had to leave off and is trying to fix these last mile components. I'm going to need to be able to develop this. 202. Why are all those showing up? Let me think here for a second. So git ignore has changed. Packages. The packages folder isn't getting cleared out. I'm also coming from this, a little bit of a monorepo discussion in the WP project. Not only was there a little bit of complexity with the Xdebug unnecessary dependency, but the WPN project is like within this monorepo, Gutenberg monorepo, and I think it's really clouding things significantly. Just in terms of like the CI and testing process that runs on all the pull requests and issues that are flooding in, and pull requests that are flooding in relating to Gutenberg, which are probably already high, pretty high bandwidth, and even with GitHub tags, is a lot of churn. And yeah, I'm just thinking my suggestion, and it has been suggested recently by another person, is that WPN should have its own repository. It's a unique project that's not so tied to Gutenberg. It's not Gutenberg centric. It's also WordPress general development tool, and is in a unique, is due to that unique position that it justifies or warrants having its own project and issue queue, and of course testing and things like that would need to be set up. But it would just get it out of this really noisy and frankly cluttered environment of the Gutenberg lib folder, which is a whole assortment of things that aren't even necessarily Gutenberg plugins. They're even upstream dependencies. It's quite confusing, and granted, it's my first kind of foray into the Gutenberg code, so chalk it up to just unfamiliarity. Okay, so that won't work. Can't just remove the packages. I'm just gonna, dang it. Undo that. Yeah, that's what I should have done in the first place. Discard. Okay, so now I'm up on, should be up to date with, I'm not sure. Our source folder should have it here. The README, oh, I'm not trying to do, no, for sure. Preview, markdown, format, markdown preview. I think this is necessary due to the way Storybook is architected, that we still need to install legacy pure dependencies. I don't understand technically why. I just wish I knew of a simpler alternative to Storybook. If you just want to develop some components and be able to preview the component and it's just a view component, and you want to preview it independently of anything else. It's not a whole project. Like, how do you develop view component libraries? What's the common development workflow? Is Storybook the de facto way of doing it? Maybe so. Is there a simpler way? Like, I've proposed we use ViewPress as like a self-documenting development environment in a way, but there was not, there was trade-offs there as well. And it didn't necessarily reduce entirely the complexity of the dependencies. It was about on par with the Storybook dependency bloat, so to speak, or anyway, size of the dependencies. But I think the dependencies were more congruent because we're not using React. All right, so now we're going to run. I'm going to try skipping this optional step. All right, so let's see what happens. So it does include a build step. All right. Let me bring that over here to one interesting thing about GitHub is you almost don't need like a chat, like a Slack or a Discord, or it's almost real time. And I think for a lot of the conversations in open source communities, having a context is really useful. And for more generic discussions, GitHub now supports Q&A type things, or just let's see what kind of categories we have set up here. General announcements and Q&A, show and tell. So yeah, I think it's kind of replacing the need to a certain extent for like Slack or Discord real-time chat. In particular, conversations get buried and lost. The context gets lost in those. Whereas these types of online forum type discussions, discourse is another example. You have a searchable public. It's like a mailing list, but it's, I think, a little more user-friendly and near real time. When a community gets to a particular size, I reckon it's a good factor in choosing whether or not to implement a real-time chat solution. But even those get really busy, and we have a Slack channel with Creative Commons with something like 14,000 people. But it can be a bandwidth sink, and I think some staff might be kind of tuning it out a little bit out of necessity. Interesting. All right, very cool. So yeah, I'll just kind of keep promoting this. Meantime, we're having almost a real-time discussion here. All right, so come back to this. Open these. So we've got this, but they haven't pushed changes. But yeah, it's mostly working. Granted, storybook is very elegant and useful, so I'm not really hard to set in anything about removing it. But if it becomes a blocking issue that you can't even get a development environment running, which it has for several months now, that's when it begs the question, is there a simpler way of doing this? Or how do we move forward? What are our options? Yeah, pretty cool though. All right. So speaking of Slack, I'm going to just check over here that Drew is aware of Sadnik's work. Anik Das, Sadnik. All right, well, we'll come back. I'll just keep an eye here. I think it'll show me if there's a response. And it looks like we got a response here for this feature template feature. I would like to be assigned. All right, sounds good. How did, oh, it's automatically assigning me. Yes. Okay. So let's remove that. I don't think anybody should really be automatically assigned, but I understand. Might be. I understand why that would be. It's documented. This is an interesting problem. Can't scroll here. It spills off the bottom of the screen for some reason at normal zoom. I'm sure it's specifically relating to the, well, it probably is relating to the issue template editing, because it doesn't happen with regular code editor. Something to do with this side block. Yeah, they'll fix it. All right. I guess it's okay to report these things. I think I'd have some other feedback for GitHub regarding their project management at a future time. It's a little bit fragmented. It's kind of difficult. It's improving quite a lot, but things like it would be nice to have epics. Actually, let's see if that's already been discussed. GitHub feedback, epic, milestone, Kanban. Cool. Check the chat, make sure I'm not missing any messages there. All right. So we'll have to kind of come back to it. Let me check notifications again. Yep, so we've got another response here. Interesting. Cool. Wow, this is really great. I'm excited. I think this is going to get across the line. Thank you, Anik. I really appreciate the help. Okay. I think that's a pretty good stopping point. We've gotten through the notifications. Take a break for the afternoon. I've got some errands to run. Yep. Okay. So this has been a CodeBuddies.org hangout session for the Creative Commons open source office hours. We really do appreciate the help we're getting from the open source community. It's making a big difference. It's helping us to be able to focus on the core project of the CreativeCommons.org redesign, which has been ongoing for, I think, over a year, something that's quite a while, and we were spread a little bit thinly. Now we're just kind of laser focusing on that, and having community contributors come in and support us with the vocabulary and the chooser projects is really helpful to keep those projects alive and vital and evolving. So thank you. And thank you for your time watching this video and hanging out. Hope to see you around the Creative Commons open source community, and we'll have a monthly Creative Commons community call this afternoon. So if you've got some time, stop by our Slack, and you can get the link to the call, or codebuddies.org. There's also a hangout where you can RSVP and join the call this afternoon. Thank you again for your time, and have a great day.